We found this shelter.
Still love.
In a town ravaged by a mysterious virus outbreak, a family had been hidden away in a fallout shelter for 301 days, believing they were the last survivors. Ray and Claire constantly reminded their young daughter Zoe of the rules: never be loud, never lose control, and above all, never leave the shelter. Out there, beings they called breathers lurked, ready to kill. One morning, Zoe awoke from a nightmare about the breathers. Shaken, she crawled under her bed to hide. When Claire found her, Zoe insisted it wasn't her who was scared. It was her talking doll. Claire gently led her to Ray to calm her fears. To ease the tension, he suggested they play their little game. Ray recounted the details of his watch duty, confirming that all had been quiet. To reassure her, Ray let her climb the ladder to the hatch. Carefully, she checked every lock and chain until she was satisfied. Only then did she return to her parents. Afterward, Zoe made a new tally mark on the wall to count another day of survival. For breakfast, she chose a can of peaches. As the family prepared their meal, Ray noticed the water pump wasn't working. He opened it up, fiddling with its parts until it sputtered back to life. Suddenly, Zoe pointed out something troubling. The can she'd chosen was empty, with a small hole in the side. Alarmed, Claire and Ray searched the pantry and found 12 cans with similar holes. They concluded a rat had gotten in through the air duct. Zoe worried aloud about breathers using the same route, but her parents explained the duct was far too small for such creatures. Even so, Claire grimly announced they would need to eat less. Zoe protested. They were already eating so little, but the family had no choice. Afterward, Zoe's frustrations boiled over. She hated being trapped, hated not having friends, hated having nothing. But Ray's response was firm. You have us. And that's more than the people who died the day of the outbreak. He gestured toward the wall of tally marks. Each one is a miracle. Trying to lift the mood, the family played a board game together. At one point, Ray gently closed Zoe's eyes with his fingers, weaving a story about their old life. For a moment, Zoe smiled. The game brightened Zoe's mood, her laughter filling the shelter. Later, Ray and Claire found a quiet moment to talk. Claire's worry weighed heavy. Ray tried to reassure her, promising he'd go outside for food if necessary. When Claire argued about the danger, Ray silenced her concerns with a kiss. One thing led to another, and they moved quietly, their intimate moment hidden from Zoe, who was playing cards in the other room. Afterward, Ray drifted into uneasy sleep, his dreams haunted by the chaos of the outbreak. Meanwhile, Zoe, still curious about the world outside, asked Claire if they were truly the only survivors. Claire brought out the periscope they'd built, letting Zoe peer through the air duct to see what remained. At first, Zoe was excited, but her excitement faded as the wasteland came into view. But she felt relieved to confirm the hatch was secure. Suddenly, Zoe spotted movement in the pantry. A rat was gnawing on another can of food. Alarmed, she called for her parents. Ray woke instantly, grabbing his dagger as he approached the rat with deliberate care. Just as he was about to strike, the rat darted away, knocking over a lamp in its escape. Claire acted quickly, grabbing a wrench and smashing the rat before it could flee. But the trouble wasn't over. The knocked-over lamp spilled flames onto the table. Ray touched the heated glass, realizing what was about to happen. He shoved Claire and Zoe back just as the lamp exploded. The fire quickly spread, consuming the board game Zoe loved. She tried to retrieve it, but Claire held her back. As Ray fought to fix the water pump, Claire shielded Zoe in a corner, grabbing a large cloth to smother the flames. At last, Ray got the pump working, and the spray of water doused most of the fire. Working together, they beat out the remaining embers, breaking the table in the process to stop the flames from spreading. When it was finally over, the shelter was plunged into darkness. Claire lit another lamp, and panic set in when Zoe was nowhere in sight. They searched frantically until they found her trembling under the bed. As she stammered out her fear, the smoke from the fire was escaping through the air duct. The breathers will see it. Flashback began with a quiet morning. Ray and Claire were preparing breakfast when Zoe wandered in and mentioned their neighbors were moving. At first, they didn't understand, but a glance outside revealed chaos. Curious and concerned, Ray and Claire stepped out to ask what was going on. The couple refused to answer, but their young son, Joey, blurted out that a government man had warned them about a virus, something that made people bad. In the present, the memory came rushing back to Claire as the fire's smoke poured out of the shelter. Ray, glancing at the dimming light outside, tried to reassure her. It's almost nighttime. Hopefully, it's too dark for the breathers to notice. Yet when he checked through the periscope, his face turned pale. Thick smoke marked their location like a beacon. Claire's panic surged. While Zoe sobbed that her nightmare was coming true, Ray remained firm, reminding them to stay calm. Even if the breathers saw the smoke now, by the time they arrived, it would be gone. They'd scouted the area before and found no signs of them. The shelter was well hidden. Surely that wouldn't change. But Claire realized something chilling. The smoke might vanish, but it would leave ash behind. They had no choice but to go outside and clean it before it betrayed them. For the first time in months, Ray and Claire unchained the hatch and emerged into the wasteland above. Below, Zoe couldn't resist grabbing the periscope to watch. A shadow startled her, but it was only her parents moving. Relieved, she kept looking, until a figure appeared in the distance. Panic gripped her, and she yelled, desperate to warn her parents. They didn't hear her. Trembling, she climbed the ladder and strained to open the hatch. When she didn't see them, her fear boiled over. She shouted their names. Claire rushed over, clamping a hand over Zoe's mouth. Zoe gasped out her warning. The breathers were coming. Ray and Claire turned, but instead of monsters, they saw deer sprinting past. But Claire wasn't convinced. They're running from something. We need to get back inside. Now. The family scrambled back into the shelter, Ray securing the hatch with extra care. Below, the familiar hum of fear settled over them as they heard faint footsteps above. It didn't sound like a group, just one. Breathers always traveled in packs. The family sat in tense silence, listening, waiting, as dread curled its way into their hearts. Then it happened. Zoe's doll snagged on a pipe, and the rope came loose. Its cheerful voice box crackled to life, breaking the tense quiet. Ray reacted instantly. He crushed the voice box. Zoe sobbed harder, but there was no time to comfort her. A jolt shook the hatch. A chain snapped free and struck her head. Ray, struggling to keep focus, broke the water pump and handed the pipe to Claire. She threw all her weight against the last chain as the breather managed to pry the hatch open slightly. Desperate, Ray swung the pipe, bashing the breather's hands until it recoiled. Together, they slammed the hatch closed and locked it using the pipe. The shaking finally stopped, but the ominous sound of breathing lingered outside. Just as they caught their breaths, noises from the other room startled them. Cans rolled across the floor as the shelter itself began to tremble. In Ray's mind, another memory burst to life. On the day of the outbreak, his family had packed into their car, joining the frantic exodus. Cars moving both ways as panic spread. Authorities had quarantined the town. No one was allowed to leave. Before Ray could process the situation, the earth shook violently. Rocks rained down, one smashing into his car. Now, in the present, the nightmare continued. The hatch gave way, crashing open as a group of breathers forced their way inside. Ray grabbed Claire and Zoe, pulling them into the other room. Thinking fast, Claire smashed a lamp, using the fire to create a barrier. Together, she and Ray shoved the pantry against the doorway, but they knew it wouldn't hold for long. Ray climbed onto a chair, lifting Claire and Zoe toward the air duct. They scrambled through, their small frames fitting into the narrow space. Claire turned back, trying to help Ray, but he couldn't squeeze through. Panic rising, Ray urged her to dislocate his shoulder. Claire obeyed, wrenching his arm painfully until she could drag him forward. Just as he was about to escape, the breathers yanked him back into the shelter. Claire and Zoe screamed as Ray fought back, his grunts and the sound of struggle filling the air. In the pitch-black chaos, the clash was brutal and savage. Then suddenly, a splatter of blood painted the wall. Claire and Zoe's cries turned to anguish. They could only assume the worst. Just then, Claire's sharp eyes caught movement. Shadows were approaching, sliding through the darkness. Grabbing Zoe's hand, she bolted, pulling her daughter along as they fled. At last, they broke free of the trees and found themselves on an abandoned road. Then they saw it. A massive wall, fortified with security cameras. Before they could process what it meant, the roar of a helicopter thundered overhead, a net shooting out to ensnare them. Claire and Zoe struggled. The shadows grew closer, resolving into figures. But as they neared, it became clear the breathers weren't the monsters they had feared. They were soldiers, their faces obscured by gas masks. One of them produced a syringe, plunging it into Claire and then Zoe. The world began to spin, and another memory surfaced, the shaking mountain. It hadn't been an earthquake at all. Jets screamed through the skies, dropping bombs that erupted in deafening bursts, leveling the town to ash. People ran in terror. Ray, Claire, and Zoe had joined the fleeing crowd, but amidst the chaos, Claire had remembered the local school's shelter. The family had sprinted there, slamming the hatch shut just as another bomb obliterated the ground above. Inside, they found what they needed to survive: food, supplies, even toys for Zoe. But Claire's silence spoke volumes. She showed him her hand, a deep cut turning black, the infection spreading like ink through her veins. In the present, the soldiers pulled back after taking blood samples, confirming that Claire and Zoe were the only survivors. Their cold efficiency made it clear what came next. Rifles were raised. Claire's breath hitched, her mind racing for a way out. The veins in her arms darkened, the virus awakening like a beast from slumber. At that moment, Ray appears fully transformed, his movements swift and brutal as he tears into the soldiers one by one. Zoe stares in horror and awe, realizing her father is no longer a normal human. Ray fights with everything he has, and despite his efforts, they retaliate with brutal precision, bringing him to his knees. While the soldiers' attention is fixed on Ray, Claire and Zoe seize their chance, slipping free from the net. Zoe runs and hides in a car, while Claire's body begins to shift. With a snarl, she lunges at the soldiers, tearing through them with a fury matched only by Ray's. But as the last soldier aims for her leg, she stumbles, falling to the ground. Just as he raises his weapon to end it, Zoe, her own transformation kicking in, she tears his mask off, exposing the face beneath. But before Zoe can fully change, Claire reaches out, begging her to stop. Zoe is out of control, and she lunges at her mother. But Claire remains calm, reminding Zoe of the ones they've always lived by, and with each word, her transformation slowing until it finally stops. And with that, they turn toward Ray, his last breath shallow, as he closes Zoe's eyes one final time, his love for her evident. Before they can mourn, the sound of the helicopter's engine fills the air again, and instinctively, they run, seeking refuge in the sewer system. As they move through the darkness, something stirs ahead of them. But to their surprise, it's Joey, the boy they had seen earlier. He tells them there's a group of survivors living deep in the sewers, offering them a chance at life. Zoe, still processing the loss and the chaos, looks up, and for the first time in months, she sees sunlight breaking through the cracks, the light warm on her face. She counts silently to herself 302 miracles. And with that, this story ends here. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel.